Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast, your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion, where we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. A topic near and dear to my heart. There was a hockey game played on March 26, the year of our Lord, 1997, and I was in Key West, Florida, with a number of guys that I was going to school with, some of those who had just joined on to the trip, a spring break escapade to one Key West, Florida. That hockey game was the culmination of a rivalry that began a couple years earlier, and in many a Gen Xer's mind is one of the best hockey games that was played in the 90s, if not the best game that they'd ever seen in their entire lives. E60, an ESPN property, did a documentary on the rivalry between the Detroit Red Wings and the Colorado Avalanche. Let's discuss. Thank you to my loyal listeners. I do appreciate you. If you are new to the podcast, please like, subscribe, thumbs up, 5-star, write a review, send to friends and enemies far and wide. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Please consider supporting.
Act 1, Unrivaled, the Detroit Red Wings versus the Colorado Avalanche.
My buddy John, who does the Two Idiots Discuss Sports hockey segments with me, he sent me a text about a documentary on ESPN called Unrivaled. It chronicled the build-up to the rivalry between the Detroit Red Wings and the Colorado Avalanche. If you know your hockey history, it culminated in one of the most unique hockey games, regular season hockey games in particular, that one could ever see, where it had hundreds of penalty minutes. There was at one point in the game a fight where every player on the ice was engaged, including the goalies. The program is part of ESPN's E60 series, and I had no idea that the program even existed. This is one of the downsides of no longer having cable television. As much as I have benefited from not watching advertisements for all of these products that I never want to have anything to do with, namely all these pharmaceutical ads, all of these big pharma drugs, one of the things that you miss is advertising for programs that you may want to watch that are produced by these networks. Because what's interesting is I never pay attention, even if I'm on Netflix, even if I'm on ESPN Plus, if I'm on any of the other apps, I don't pay attention to the ads that are being run for brand new programming or for upcoming programming. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but it probably warrants an entire segment that once you actually separate yourself from advertisements, you stop paying attention. It's funny how conditioned we are to follow ads, and once you break that programming, you don't pay attention to advertisements the same way that you did. And when you're exposed to them, you become even more disgusted than you may have been sitting through them, waiting for your regularly scheduled program to start again. So I find this documentary, and it's 2 or 3 years old. It's not new. It wasn't just recently released, but it chronicles the lead up to the Nordiques leaving Quebec City and going to Denver. All of the fortuitous things that happened to that team between the Lindros trade, all the players that the Nordiques were able to get because of trading his rights, all of the fortuitous things that happened with other players, namely the New Jersey Devils willing to trade Claude Lemieux, the guy who was the most valuable player in the Stanley Cup Finals the year prior. And one of the biggest trades in NHL history is Patrick Roy demanding that the Montreal Canadiens trade him and going to the Colorado Avalanche. I remember this vividly, but most people who aren't that big of fans of hockey or not big fans of either the Red Wings or the Avalanche, they may not remember that it was the Red Wings who were in Montreal who shelled Patrick Roy, and he was already having problems with the head coach at the time. That coach left him in to be embarrassed, I believe to the tune of 9 goals. One of the greatest goaltenders of all time, he had a bad night, and he was left in, he was hung out to dry is probably a better way to say it, to the tune of 9 goals. After finally being pulled, went over to the bench, sat down for a second, then walked over to where the owners sit. Now, you want to talk about tradition and you want to talk about old school. The owners of the team, of the actual franchise, sit right next to where the coach stands throughout the course of the game. You literally have ownership looming over the players and the coach in Montreal. Waugh sits down for a second, thinks, then stands up, walks past his own coach, and tells the owners of the team, I've played my last game for the Montreal Canadiens, loud enough where the coach could hear it, then walk by, stares him directly into the eye, and goes and sits down again. That was, in fact, his last game as a Montreal Canadien. This entire story is near and dear to my heart, not only because I'm a Red Wings fan, but because it brings me back to that time in my life where, as a Red Wings fan, you took a lot of shit. The Red Wings had not won a Stanley Cup in 40-some years. They were the President's Trophy winner, which means they were the best team in the league. They had the most points in the league. They lose in 1994 in the first round of the playoffs to the 8-seeded San Jose Sharks, who were, I believe, only in their third season as a franchise. It was the first time they had made the playoffs. They make it as an 8 seed. They end up beating the Detroit Red Wings, the President's Cup winner, which means they beat the best team in the league in 7 games. To illustrate the extent to which it was a fluke, I believe they lose in the next round. It's not like some of those hockey stories that you hear where the team catches fire and an 8 seed goes all the way to the Stanley Cup. I believe they lose in the very next round. After the heaping helping of shit sandwich that was the loss to the Sharks in the first round in 1994, the Detroit Red Wings, motivated by that disappointment, make it to the Stanley Cup against the New Jersey Devils, against Claude Lemieux, and in 4 games get swept and look rather apathetic in those 4 games. They get out-hustled, they get out-muscled. It was just an all-around shit show when it comes to what you would expect out of a team that had not made the Stanley Cup in decades and had not won one in decades. 1996, the Red Wings are once again one of the best teams in the league. They win the President's Trophy that year, an expansion franchise in many people's mind, the Quebec Nordiques moving to Denver, Colorado. Denver had no idea what they were getting. They absolutely had no idea how good that hockey team was, and it was only a few shrewd moves that needed to be made for that to be one of the best teams in the league. In the Western Conference Finals, the Avalanche beat the Red Wings, knocked them out again. So 3 years in a row, one of the best teams in the league, they get bounced without seriously challenging for a Stanley Cup. In 1997, I'm getting my master's degree at the University of Tennessee. I'm 23 years old, as 23-year-olds will do. You've got your team affinities outside of the University of Tennessee, your pro sports teams, and people give one another shit over their lack of success. Being a hockey fan, and a hockey fan of a team that hadn't won in years, you were either getting completely laughed at for liking the sport or completely laughed at for liking a sport that no one else really liked and rooting for a team that was a perennial disappointment. That year, Detroit played Colorado 4 times in the regular season, and the first 3 tries were abject failures. Detroit loses those 3 games and does not appear to be the better side. Add to that, the teams had a violent rivalry where each team knew the other was the team that the other was going to have to beat if they were going to win the Stanley Cup. Colorado had to go through Detroit. Detroit had to go through Colorado. Because of that, the games were tense, they were often tight, and they were violent. The violence in the rivalry was not kicked off by an incident that I so vividly remember. It was another incident where basically slams Adam Foote's face into the divider that lines the panels that encompass every hockey rink. I had completely forgotten about this, and to illustrate what a different league the NHL was back in the 90s, it still had a lot of the remnants of the 80s. This was an absolute take hand, place on back of head, slam face into this divider. Foot falls to his knees. He's bleeding. He's clearly cut. There wasn't even a penalty called. Not a 2-minute roughing minor where it should have been a major because there was blood drawn. Not any kind of match penalty. There wasn't even a penalty called. And Foote was livid, and so were the rest of the Colorado Avalanche. And I vaguely remembered that incident, but being a Red Wings fan, you just kind of wrote that off. Watching it in the documentary and the violence of it, and the fact that there was no real repercussion for doing something that, even at that time in the league, was unbecoming. You slam a guy's face into the boards, you are inviting retribution. Even if a penalty's called, even if it's a match penalty, you are still inviting retribution. Then there's the infamous hit Claude Lemieux on Chris Draper, where Lemieux basically breaks Chris Draper's face. The documentary does an excellent job at illustrating the scope of the damage from that hit. And it was extensive. It was extremely violent. Draper's face to this day still reflects the violence of that hit and what was needed to be done just to reconstruct that side of his face. As a Red Wings fan, this whole thing was looming. This rivalry between Colorado and Detroit, the violence that had taken place, the fact that Detroit had fallen short in '96, the fact that as part of that falling short, it felt like the Avalanche were not only the better team, but were the more physical team, which it brought back those nasty memories of the Stanley Cup final against New Jersey, where the Red Wings were just flat out physicaled. Roll into '97, and the Avalanche take the first 3 regular season games. As a fan, you knew something was going to happen. Now, again, I'm living in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm going to the University of Tennessee to get my master's degree. I'm a big hockey aficionado. Nobody in my friend group is that into hockey. Some of them will watch it with me while it is on, but it's not like they're picking up a team, and it certainly isn't like they know well enough what specifically is going on in this rivalry between Detroit and Colorado. March 26, 1997, it's the last matchup between Detroit and Colorado in the regular season. It just so happens that that date lines up with spring break at the University of Tennessee that year, and my friends and I, for spring break, go to one Key West, Florida. My buddy Doc and I, Doc has been on the podcast as part of 4 Idiots Discuss Sports. He is a Nova, DC area native and roots for all those teams, and he has been on to discuss the debacle that was one Dan Snyder as owner of the Washington Redskins, or whatever the hell they call that team now. He and I drove from Knoxville, Tennessee to Key West, Florida. Quite a long drive, but a memorable one. We are pre-gaming in our condo prior to going out, and that game is on. And I'm excited, and I say, we're not going to take it anymore, and there's going to be fights. You watch. And all of these people who are not that big into hockey and who are, as 23, 24, 25-year-old males, ready to ridicule one another, given every opportunity, use this as an opportunity to ridicule me. A, who cares? B, they're going to get their asses kicked. C, why are we even waiting, prolonging our going out on spring break to watch this nonsense? But then the game started. And yes, it was as predicted, quite contested. And it was, as predicted, chock full of violence and fights. Now, some of you listening to this podcast may say, that's the reason why I don't like hockey. That's the reason why I don't like all of this testosterone and all of this toxic masculinity. Shut the fuck up. I have a hard time hearing that kind of nonsense anymore, and then within the next 2 or 3 breaths, hear a bunch of people who would say those very things also say, where did all the men go? Where is all the chivalry? What happened to the modern man? You want to know what happened? Listening and taking to heart all that beta glow stick waving bullshit. Not 30 to 45 minutes after giving me relentless shit over sitting there watching that hockey game, every swinging dick in that condominium was glued to the television screen as you saw 5 different guys from each team all engaged in one massive melee. The shit-talking was abandoned. Everyone was now invested in the outcome of this game. Side note, at least 3 of the people that were in attendance on that spring break trip have stated to me the Red Wings are still, to the extent that they even follow hockey, which they really don't, still their favorite team because of not only my enthusiasm and my energy during the course of that game, but after watching it, they were like, oh, there's something else going on here that's worthy of our attention. The Red Wings go on to win that game 6-5 in overtime. The hockey itself was just as exciting as the fights, and that momentum carried the Red Wings into the Stanley Cup Finals. The Red Wings did vanquish the Colorado Avalanche in 6 games in the Western Conference Finals. They sweep the Flyers, and they go on to win 2 straight Stanley Cups. If you were a Detroit Red Wings fan, after that game, I know exactly how you felt because that's the way I felt. I was elated. It was like I was walking on clouds for the rest of the evening. And that momentum carried me into one of the best nights that I had in my life, partying with my friends. Some people still refer to it as Pat Night. Although many a libation was consumed, they weren't so many that I couldn't keep running my mouth, and I made a friend. In the immortal words of one Forrest Gump.
And that's all I have to say about that.
As much as I question my own sports fandom, the amount of energy and the amount of money that I've invested, it's watching a documentary like that, I may question why it brings these things out in me, but it does. Although strange and perhaps unwarranted, and I mean that, perhaps unwarranted, you feel like you've won as well when you see this team that you've struggled with for so long win. Do you have more money in your bank account? No, you don't. Do you have less stress in your interpersonal life or in your professional life? No, you don't. If you have a flat tire, is anyone from the team going to come over and help you? No, they're not. But as much as those everyday problems weigh on you when your team sucks, they don't mean shit when your team breaks through and wins. And maybe that's the point. Just being able to feel that elation at some point in your life, you can hearken back to it and celebrate the fact that it ever happened at all, that you ever felt that way at all. If you have not yet, and you have ESPN Plus or Disney Plus, you can go and find this documentary, Unrivaled, the Detroit Red Wings and the Colorado Avalanche. It is well worth 2 hours of your time. This is Why Don't Vote, a podcast.